Harwich Conservation Commission for August 7th, 2019. First item on the agenda is a notice of intent for 15 Dune Road, proposal to remove existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling.
Thank you.
We had a condo on that one.
It looks like.
51 butters. Good evening, Dan Caroto from Moran Engineering, here with Paul Vassell, the buyer of the property. If what we are proposing is successful, and if as long as no other issues come up with the property. What I submitted to the commission was two, plan-wise, was two sheets. I believe the top sheet, as the commission got it, was the existing conditions, and then what showed the entire site, and then the including the existing house that had caught fire a couple of years back and has been unoccupied. And then the proposed would have been page 2, I believe, which shows the proposed house overlaid on top of the existing house. There's a proposal. Part of the proposal is for new septic system. Now, one of the important things for the buyer, Paul, was to remove the house from the floodplain, so it's pushed up to the zoning setback of 25 feet from the road, and it is it's a 27-foot wide house. Gets it out of the floodplain and really changes the building code for this house on how the foundation would need to be constructed. So overall, from the zoning compliance and the hardscape, building and hardscapes within the 50 to 100 foot setbacks, I think there's quite an improvement over existing conditions environmentally wise, and the even zoning site coverage drops from 2.1% to 1.4% of the lot. The building coverage drops from 1% to 0.9%. Again, the lot is enormous. It's a large lot. It's over 4.5 acres, but the good, most of that, everything to the east is wetland, and then within the lot, Dune Creek runs through the lot. The 200 foot from the creek is shown on the proposed conditions site plan. 50 foot from the wetland, 60 foot from the wetland, and 100 foot from the wetland. There is existing fence and shed within the 60 foot. Paul's proposing to bring everything outside of the 60 foot. The property itself is fairly abandoned and has grown back on its own, so we weren't proposing any major planting plan except to let it naturalize as it is doing. And then the one thing that's within the within the floodplain is the deck. The way the building code works, as long as that deck is self-supported, then it's its own structure, and that does not put the whole building into the floodplain. So he's looking for a deck to be able to view the backyard and have some have a decent outdoor use for the backyard, outdoor living area. So with that, we do show the silt fence, straw wattle area, work limit area. That'll end my speech.
Thank you.
For comments.
Any comments for us, Amy, tonight?
So this is I would consider a big improvement from the property from the environmental standpoint. Your closest, so basically right now you have an existing fence that's been there for a very long time, that's chain link, that goes almost about 10 feet away from the resource area. They are proposing to fully comply with our new regulation and bring that back to the 60-foot buffer zone line. The only thing that's actually within the 50 to the 60 is a little bit of the limit of work there.
What? I'm sorry? What was the last one?
I said the limit of work is within.
Oh, limit of work, I'm sorry, okay.
Yep. The shed that's currently in the backyard is sort of to be removed. They're going from 2,184 square feet in the 50 to 100 down to 440. Property is not within mapped priority or estimated habitat for wildlife. It is not, the proposed activity is not within the 200-foot riverfront area. I did look back, because just out of curiosity, I wanted to see, because I remember when it happened, that the house burnt and how that it's been abandoned. I wanted to see, because obviously the yard is extremely overgrown right now in the back, how long ago it was that it was fairly clear, and it was early 2017 that it was fairly clear. So I would recommend, that was just for my own edification. I would recommend approval of the project with a couple of conditions. One, that the fence, anything seaward, if you will, of the chain link fence is to be left to naturalize. And if the future owners, if yourself or somebody else wanted to do any invasive management, it would have to come back to the Conservation Commission for it. But anything beyond the proposed fence to be left natural, and also anything within the 100-foot buffer zone to the wetland comply with our no irrigation, fertilizations, regulations, except for if you were to do, it doesn't look like you're proposing any planting right now, so you wouldn't need temporary above-ground irrigation. So it would just be no irrigation at this point. No, that's pretty much it. The closest point of the new house would be about 80 feet away, and this would be the deck.
I'm sorry.
The deck would be detached, so it would not be it wouldn't be subject to floodplain regulation. So I recommend approval.
Thanks, Amy. Comments from the commissioners. Do you want to start, Paula?
Yeah, I just have one quick question. I see where the proposed septic system in Leacham Field is. Where is it existing now?
It's generally in that same area.
Oh,
It is.
It is right here.
Okay,
Showing
I don't
you,
even see it.
I guess on that
Because
existing
it's not
condition.
labeled.
Oh, okay, is this it here?
Yep, that's the leach, and then the little thing to the right,
Okay.
right north is a tank.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
I have no
Yeah.
comments.
Okay. John?
Don't have any questions.
Jim?
No, looks good, looks like an improvement for the site, so.
Okay.
I just had one question. Could have asked Dan too. Is the fence required, the new fence? You can have it open, right? Just not have a fence there.
Yeah, we can remove the fence.
Because the old fence is, the chain link doesn't seem to serve any purpose. I mean, nothing's gonna come crawling out of the creek up to the house. I mean, well, I don't know.
No, it would, the commission would see it as a good thing if you wanted to remove all fence.
Yeah, I don't have any plans.
We thought you were
any-
asking to put the fence in, so.
No, I actually hadn't seen that. So for whatever reason, I don't really need a fence at all on that property. So I don't plan on putting a fence.
Okay.
But at least I know the limits, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, I
What do
mean,
you
if someone
Then
has a
maybe-
dog someday,
I
maybe
I had just moved it out of the 60, the
Yep.
existing fence.
Then maybe what we should condition is some sort of a marker, either at the 60-foot line somehow, either a couple of what we call two-man stones. That way, in the future, when we're reviewing the property, to make sure the lawnmower hasn't gone into our no-disturb
oh,
zone.
I see. Okay,
So
sure.
something like that, if you didn't have a fence, maybe a couple of stones back there to signify essentially where the lawnmower shouldn't go.
No problem. Cheaper than a fence.
Okay. I was going to ask a question along those same lines. Do you have any expectations for using that backyard in any way that might encroach on that fence line?
I don't foresee anything in that backyard, whatsoever, other than, I think the deck is plenty big. The views there are just beautiful, I mean, if people want to go walk around in the yard, that's fine. Like the shed I'm getting rid of, There's a lot of area around where the septic system is in that little driveway, where the garage is. So any kind of shed or something, if someone would need that, would go over in that area anyway.
Okay,
You might have somebody here from the audience, I don't know.
sure. I was just gonna follow up and say that, it's your choice as to what you would put there to mark that line, so the stones is a good idea. You could plant trees, kind of something for you to think about and maybe close the loop with Amy, but some people put in a split rail fence, something to demark the line so there is an encroachment in the future over that 50-foot line.
Okay.
Do you want to settle on the stones now or think about it?
Yeah, no, I think the stones are good, or maybe, can we say stones or split rail?
We can condition, we can put that in the order of conditions, that it can be a choice of, but during the on-site pre-construction meeting, we need to nail it down, which
Right.
one it's gonna be.
Yeah, the fence there now is ugly. I mean, I thought there was a use for it, but obviously there
They may,
isn't.
who knows, maybe they had a dog
Oh,
back
there
in
you
the
go.
day.
Yeah, it could
I
be.
mean,
Yeah.
that's typically what you see chain link fence for, so.
Any thoughts from the commissioners on what's preferred?
I think that the split rail fence is particularly effective. The stones could be missed at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, 2 is a little bit shy. 3 or 4 might be better.
Well, I should have said a couple more. But.
Yeah, okay. It's a good plan. It's a nice property layout. It definitely backs away from the resource area, so thank you. I guess any comments from the audience?
I just have a question.
You wouldn't mind
Paul, is
coming
this-
to the mic, please?
Oh, sorry.
I'm just saying your name for the record, thank you.
Beth Petticini, my mother owns the property across the street. I agree, anything will be an improvement. Paul, is this going to be a rental property, do you know, or is this your property? I'm just curious.
It will not be a rental property, so it will be sold at some point,
Okay.
at completion.
Okay, that's it, thank you.
Okay.
So, can I ask one question? So as for the fence, is it, so it sounds like it's still up in the air whether it's fence or stones. Is it gonna be Paul's decision and?
Well, I mean, kind of just talked about it tonight, so I mean, if you want to commit to something tonight, fine. Otherwise, it's something that we can put in the conditions that it could be either or, but it needs to be discussed at the pre-construction meeting and decided.
Yeah, I mean, just, based on the landscaping back there, I'd be comfortable with the stones, but again, I would like to have the option for a split rail, but again, I don't see why I would do that, so maybe I just commit to do the stones, And if someone wants to have a dog someday, they just come to you folks, right, for
They'd have to get a permit,
for
yeah.
the fence?
The fence is a split rail is a bit more of a barrier, like stones, people may not understand that they're really, but it's more for us to, the stones are a good way, if we see that there's actually encroachment that happened, we can know that that's where it should have stopped and how much was done. Fence is a little bit more of a barrier.
Okay.
Right, and we're not talking along personally, I'm not saying along the entire line, it's really just.
You could have it kind of spread out. In other words, it wouldn't have to be a closed-in, like corral type thing.
No, it should be closed, well, right, it should be along, my envisioning is kind of along this line back in here, along the 60.
But as for going up towards the house, is that will still be allowable, or are we talking about just along the 60-foot setback? Is there an alteration to this plan that I should be doing?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right now, I think you have it going right up to the house,
How
right?
about we say, either a split
Yeah.
rail fence where the proposed fence is going to be, or stones or living fence as determined at the onsite.
I think that's good language. I know you're thinking if you have to modify the plans.
I don't think we do.
Okay. As long as the order is clear, and again, you could choose the third option too, a living fence. Those are often a good choice.
Shrub, like,
Something that'll
actual-
grow substantially.
Amy, right now, the proposed fence is along the east side of, sort of northeast side, but then it veers towards the northwest. Am I getting the directions correct? It veers on the north side. I know it should be twisted a little bit, but if he chooses a split rail, does he have to go from the corner of the proposed fence here up toward the house, toward the street, the way?
I would say
It's
no.
presented
I would
here.
say no, he doesn't have to. It's really, I think the purpose is to for the
Mark
60
it.
is to mark the 60.
So if he chose stones, he only has to do them
Along that line.
along this line, not the one going toward the street.
Yeah. I don't see why you would need to do that.
Does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah. It sounds like Paul and Amy will, sounds like this plan is fine, as long as, this would be a maximum.
Mm-hmm, right.
And then you could always reduce the fence down to a split rail or or just stones. It's clear in my mind now.
If you were to make an adjustment, would you just annotate the existing map? Would that be easily done?
Or we could, if we made the change in the field, I could make the change and then have it,
And just mark it?
yeah, make sure that it's in the folder of what's supposed to be there.
Yep.
If it's less invasive than what this shows,
Right.
then I think it can be a field change with me,
Yeah,
if you're comfortable
sure.
with that.
Absolutely.
Okay, any further comments? Do we have a motion from the table?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 15 Dune Road, remove existing dwelling and construct new dwelling with the condition that the area seaward of the limit of work be left to naturalize, and that no fertilizers or chemicals are used within the 100-foot buffer zone.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Seconded by Paula. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Shouldn't have raised my hand. My hand was raised just because we talked about irrigation too. Since they're not proposing any planting at this time, I would just say no irrigation as well.
To me, that was implied with your
Okay,
earlier
I'm
comment.
sorry.
Yep, on
Because
the other
usually it goes
side.
along with
Yeah,
the chemical
that's-
thing,
yeah.
which I mentioned.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sounds good, thanks.
so we will draft the orders of conditions and those will be voted upon in 2 weeks.
Thank
But
you.
it doesn't stop you from starting the application for other things if you haven't.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay?
Thank you.
Do you want us to take Charlie first for fiddlers? Unless you're expecting somebody else? Nope. Can we go a little bit out of order, Mr. Chair, and do 5 Fiddler's Landing?
Yeah, do you want me to rattle off the continuances?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 61 Bell's Neck Road, a proposal for new dwellings and appurtenances. They've requested a continuance to August 21st, 2019. I move that we grant the continuance. Seconded by John. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 30 Harbor Road, proposal for a pier, ramp, float, and dredging. They've requested a continuance to September 4th. I move that we grant that continuance.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. And then the next notice of intent for 4 Shady Drive, proposal for new dwelling and appurtenances. They've requested a continuance to August 21st, 2019. I move that we grant that.
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, okay. That brings us to a notice of intent for 5 Fiddler's Landing, installation of a rock revetment.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Charlie Agro. I'm an engineer with Coastal Engineering Company. I'm here representing the councilmans for 5 Fiddler's Landing. I think the way we left things at the last hearing was that we were pretty close with the layout of the rock revetment. It was more a question of the specific plannings plan that we didn't have at the time of the last hearing. One thing I cleared up on the proposed revetment plan was where the revetment would taper into the existing grade, because that was a question at the last hearing. So I showed that the revetment will be filled up to about this area, which is the limit of the salt marsh, because I know that was one of the big concerns at the last hearing, where exactly the revetment would taper into the existing grade. And the plantings plan, I discussed this with Amy and I got a list of the approved plantings. I met with the councilmen at their property, as well as their landscaper, to figure out what would work where for their, where they'd want a little bit more coverage to have a little bit of privacy, where they'd want to have some lower lying plants to maintain their view. And that's kind of what we came up with here. On the southern end of the revetment is where we propose Carolina or Virginia rose. Is typically planted on a 4-foot off center. And in the middle area here, on either side of the dock, we propose a mix of false indigo, sweet fern, or yarrow, planted on a 2-foot center. And then in this area here, I believe it was more Carolina or Virginia rose, planted again on 4 feet off center. And I had a brief discussion with Amy about maintaining any high tide bush located along the toe of the slope here. And I don't think that will be an issue at all. This was after we had submitted the plans, but if however you guys want to go about either conditioning the order of conditions or something, we can add something that says the contractor to maintain, transplant the high tide bush, and at the pre-construction meeting, we can locate it with the contractor and they can discuss their means and methods of maintaining the high tide bush, and any high tide bush that's damaged during the project can be replanted. And if anybody has any questions about the revetment or the plantings plan, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any comments for us, Amy?
None on the revetment. I think we came to, without approving, we came to an agreement about where it really should start to taper, and that's so we don't have an adverse impact to salt marsh. So it just came down to the plantings. I did speak with Charlie and expressed it just in the plant area with the native grass mix, which is kind of the hatched area. I was a little concerned if it was really just grasses and wildflowers, essentially, because there's, not saying that they would, but there is a tendency maybe to let the lawnmower go a little bit farther there. So I had, in addition to some of the high tide bush that were going to be on this toe of the slope, I did mention some small shrubs that wouldn't be a visual impediment, but also would serve to naturalize the bank a little bit more, such as sweet fern. So incorporating some of those plantings into there would be my recommendation. And my other recommendation, I'm sorry I forgot to mention it when we were talking today, the 2 bushes that are slumping right now are beach plums. So, and I would anticipate with the installation of the wall and the grading that those would be lost. So I think to stay, because again, same thing as like we're doing with the high tide bush, you'd kind of want to replace what's being lost. Maybe not in that exact same location, but somewhere on the top of the bank. If those 2 beach plums cannot be salvaged, I think that they should be replaced somewhere along the top of the bank.
I think that's our plan with this. This is a beach plum here, right at the
there's
the
2 of
corner
them.
revetment
Yep.
here, and that was the plan here. That's why I actually left it in with the planning's plan, so that they were going to try to maintain it and revive it as much as possible, and then plant another Virginia Carolina rose on the other side. And I guess that can also be the exact location where it makes sense. I can leave that up to the landscaper if it makes more sense to put it at the end of that before the shorter stuff, or wherever else in the property it might make sense.
Yep.
Now the other bush, where
I
exactly
think
is
it's
that
actually,
one?
unless it's one giant one. We went back there today just because it had been a little while.
Oh, it's in the same area?
It's
It might be
just
2?
on the base of the bank there. I can't really, it looks like it's 2. It may just be a mangled mass of 1.
Yeah, I understand, yep.
But we could just condition if that beach plums, if they are compromised and cannot, aren't going to make it, that it needs to be replanted at the top of the coastal bank there. And at a location to be decided on the field.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable, and I discussed that with the councilmen, the planting a few more of the sweet fern in this area here, and they didn't oppose that, as long as it was along the slope and not on the lawn itself, and I told them that was the point, to have it on the slope.
Yeah, the point was to have a little bit more of a shrubby, woody vegetation
So that there
to
was,
renaturalize
yeah.
on the slope there. grasses do have the best root systems, honestly, to hold that slope, but if it's just grass, I'm a little nervous that it's gonna become maintained. So with those conditions, I can recommend approval.
Thanks, Amy. I'm gonna jump in before I forget. So for the beach plum, it almost sounds like we should condition it to go ahead and plant another beach plum or two around that spot. There's a lot of different, shrubs being put in, but I think the beach plum have really high value. And so instead of putting the option in, if it's failing, put it someplace, I think I'd like to see a cluster there. So, maybe put another beach plum or two on either side of the one that's there. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I know the concern would be a view. So would it be trying to compromise, would it be acceptable to maybe put them to the north or south?
How about along the property line to the, I think it's the north, there's, you've got Virginia rose plants, which,
On the south, you mean?
is that the south? Okay.
Where the existing timber bulkhead is?
Yeah. I'm
I
just,
don't, yeah, I don't think that would be a problem. I think
Yeah.
that would, be a buffer between the neighbor's property there.
right.
And they've got a lot of vegetation.
They've got
they
already
just
a lot of
planted as
shrubs
well.
there. It's not gonna
Right.
impact the view over there.
I think the coarseness of the beach plum really adds good wildlife habitat. And so sometimes the others can be successful, but I think the beach plum can really, build a dense buffer there. So I wouldn't mind just putting that in where
Yep.
we substitute a few plants for beach plums
Okay,
on that corner.
can do that.
Okay, I'll get back to comments from the commissioner. Paula, do you have any?
No.
Okay. Carolyn?
Nope, I have no comments.
So just to clarify what you're saying what you're proposing to go on the southern end there is in addition to the existing beach plum,
The existing beach plum
is to the right of the dock.
is right here.
Right.
So we're proposing to put them down here. If this can be saved, great.
Right.
But there should be a couple of beach plum down here instead of the roses.
Well, if they can save the beach plum that's
Okay.
here, what if they just, because it's already, the roots are already exposed,
It's
maybe it'd
huge
be
too,
easy
yeah.
enough just to move it
Yep.
up out of the ground and bring it over to this area if it has a better chance of surviving over here. And then these Virginia roses that were proposed over here, we could just move them to that side.
What do people think about that? I'm trying to get a little more beach plum, which I think has high habitat value.
So where I was going with it is save the existing one where it is, and if it can't be saved, what you're already recommending and then adding what you're suggesting and leaving it at that. So you're asking for more beach plum.
Yeah,
So
basically.
you'd get more beach plum if you still require a beach plum in the current location and then add a couple in the southern end.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and if they can't save the one that's there, so be it, because we've already got 2 or 3 plantings at the southern end. Is that what you're thinking?
Sure. So I have another comment, which is on the property today, it's very clear that the lawn right up at the edge of the bank is being fed and probably treated with herbicides, because it's a nice bright green lawn with nothing but turf grass there. So we will condition that there will be no chemical applications allowed. I would suggest that the owners could stop doing that now, but
I mentioned that to them in their landscaper, that was a new regulation for conservation.
Yeah, and we'll put little directions in there too, as far as, as things change, as they will, in terms of the composition of what that lawn will be. It should be, overseeded with a native seed mix. They do have irrigation there, so I don't think we're saying take that out. We're just saying stop the chemical application on the property.
And I'll reiterate that to them as well.
Yep.
I was gonna bring up the point that John made about the fertilizing, and that's about all I have.
Can I just ask a question on the beach plum, the existing beach plums? If those can be saved, that's good. But if they can't be saved, replace them and then add the beach plum to the south also.
Well, I think I'm asking for a couple beach plums to the south, just to make that change to the
Right,
planting plan.
but if the existing ones can be saved, fine. If not, could we condition that they, beach plum be planted where the existing ones are being taken out?
Oh, I don't know enough about that spot to know if it's really a good beach plum spot.
Well, it's a good-sized plant.
Yeah, it's a huge.
It's a
beach
huge
plum.
plant, and I would hate to see, I mean, if it can be saved, that would be a great thing.
I think that's part of their goal, and I actually just had some peach plum jelly over the weekend that was delicious, so I would want to save it if it was on my property.
It has beach plums on it already. They're
Yeah.
still green, but they're beach
Yeah,
plums
so I would
on
definitely
it.
want to save it, so, and maybe it's something we could even bring up at the pre-construction meeting, is that work? And if, you know, when the contractor's on site, he can discuss it with Amy, how he plans to save it, as well as how he plans to save the high tide bush.
Okay.
Well, I think hopefully, I mean, if it's going to be saved and either left in place or moved, it's one of if the site's not gonna be exposed for weeks and weeks on end. This is probably a couple of day job. This is small revetment. So it's gonna be very little, the thing can hopefully either be stabilized in place or can be moved.
And maybe this is the best location for a plant that size too, because there's a lot more area here to work with. So maybe that does end up being a better place to move it over to here, and then,
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is hopefully keep it in place. If we can't, it can be moved, and then I think ultimately we wanna see a couple of more beach plums on the site. And I think along that southern property line, it's not gonna, one, we'll get some more habitat value and food and whatnot for wildlife, but it won't be an impact for your client visually.
Okay. Any further comments? Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the installation of the rock revetment with the landscaping that we have just discussed at 5 Fiddler's Landing.
Second.
Seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And can I say one more thing, just for the record, in regards to the project?
Mhm.
So speaking with Mr. Councilman, you know, they've been very happy to work with the commission and to make these changes. They want to be as good as they can for the environment and the harbor and everything else. And they're still concerned about the area to the north that we're not revetting. They hope that the solution that they're going forward with, the plantings and covering the revetment in this area, it lasts a long time, 20, 30 years, and they're looking to stay here and pass the property on to their children someday. If there's any issues with further erosion, they'd like to, especially since the corner house is still, you know, within 25 feet of the coastal bank, they would like to revisit the project in the long term at some point, if needed. Hopefully it never comes up, and hopefully this is a good long-term solution for them, but they'd like to keep that open as well.
So maybe a way that we can better monitor what's going on is to set up a benchmark in the wall somewhere so we can monitor the height of the marsh and the level of the beach, things like that, erosion.
I agree, and then I think most order conditions for plantings, isn't it, you go for a partial order conditions for the structure itself, and you come back 3 years later for
Two
the.
partials.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, it gets too messy.
Yeah, so I basically told them, I was like, you know, the best thing to have is historic pictures when we have these projects. Like, well, I wish we would've had a picture from 1985 or whatever. So I just told them to monitor
Start doing it,
themselves and to let us know if anything came up. But they asked me to say something on their behalf tonight.
Okay.
Yep.
But I thank you all very much.
Well, further on that, do you think
Yeah.
a benchmark set to a known elevation on the north side of the revetment would be, and then
We
have
can set a drill hole and
Yeah, set
take a,
A measurement.
yeah, that would work.
photographs that will show the edge?
We can monitor, because you have a little bit of a coastal beach strip there between
Right.
the toe of the bank and the marsh, that can monitor that level. If that starts to drop, then that's an indicator that, you know, maybe, I mean, and there's a chance too, not on the slope itself, but maybe on the coastal beach area in the future, if needed, there could be a small amount of nourishment done as well.
Great,
So, with application, but
yeah.
that way if we put some, mark in there, hopefully we'll be able to monitor a little bit.
That sounds good.
All right, well,
Thank
thank
All right,
you.
well, thank you all very much.
Okay, I guess we'll return to the notice of intent for 23 Snow Inn Road, proposal for a seasonal deck, tiki bar, lockers, and mitigation plantings.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dave McNevich, Coastal Engineering Company, and Bill Ganchert from Witchmere Beach Club. So we had come in for a discussion, can't remember now if it was May or June, about the tiki bar deck here that's on the beach. And the commission had asked us to file by, I think, July 22nd or 23rd, whatever the filing date was, which is what this is. And at the informal discussion, we talked about the fact that it was seasonal, temporary deck that is removed, installed in June and then removed after Labor Day. But we talked about a 4-to-1 mitigation ratio being required for that. And then in the course, we looked at also there was some some storage boxes on the beach. So we prepared this plan. We have the total area shown. It's just slightly more than 2,000 square feet existing now, and we're proposing slightly more than a 4-to-1 ratio of about 8,350 square feet of new mitigation planting. Many of you were at the on-site walkthrough today. We've got about 2,000 square feet on the west side, and the balance is over on the east side. On this side, we're extending, we would be extending the, there was a drift fence that had been installed a number of years ago that I think runs all the way from back out to here. And the dune has built over the top of that, and it's pretty healthy, and it's got some shape to it. The proposal would be to extend that drift fence 50 feet south and plant beach grass 30 feet wide, and then coming back to meet the existing dune that's developed there. So that's on that side. On the east side, over by Witchmere Harbor Inlet, doing the same thing, extending the drift fence 50 feet to the south, and then planting with the beach grass. So that is what the proposal was. That's what we had staked and viewed when we were out there today.
Thank you. Any comments, Amy?
Yeah, so, just going back, this is as a result of, the tiki bar and the decking associated with the tiki bar, as well as the storage lockers. The boardwalk, we might as well hit it right now. We have a couple of plans that show the boardwalk to be shorter. I know Mr. Gancher has a plan from the 80s that show the full extent of it. It has been, well, as far as I could see it in Google Earth, it's hard to see once you get farther back, but it's been there for many years. In my mind, I mean, I think a boardwalk, it channelizes access to a certain extent, so, but I think we should, so whether or not you want to consider it for as part of mitigation, if you're needing mitigation for it, I think we have some record that it was been like that for a while now. I didn't have it, but it goes back to the 80s. Mr. Ganchert has the plan in front of him. So, because that's something I mentioned in your site summary, so I wanted to bring that up right away. As far as the excess structure, or the structures that have not been permitted, the tiki bar deck and storage units, the last meeting we did say, while we can't guarantee approval, you know, it seemed like this area could really benefit from some naturalization. And that maybe that could outweigh essentially any negative impact that the tiki bar and associated area is having. So this is a new structure unpermitted within the actual resource area. So it's a fairly big deal. And as such, you've shown 4-1. I would recommend changing it a little bit. Again, to allow you to keep the tiki bar, it would have to really prove that what you're proposing to do is going to have a real environmental benefit to the resource. That's the trade-off. First, I would recommend maybe not a sand drift fence as you have it at the two areas. I think you could still build the dune with a series of snow fence seasonally with beach grass planting, maybe even with symbolic fencing to keep people off. I think you can still build that dune area without having to put a permanent structure such as the fence in there. So I can't recommend extending that. And then when we were out on site today, at first when I spoke with the both of you, I think I was saying we should really focus more of the mitigation towards the west, where there's an existing dune field there that's a high habitat value for a variety of things. And I still think we should do a minimum of what you have here, if not a little bit more over on that end. But we were on site today, and so last time I'd been out there, the turns weren't there yet. It's a very clear area on the eastern side by the jetty that is being used as a staging area for a colony of terns. And that area you've had to fence off, essentially symbolic fence off, in order to protect that. And it's starting to grow in anyways. My first question is that the first time you've had to do that?
Put the fence up?
Yeah.
No.
For the terns?
Yes, for the turns.
Okay. Clearly they, you know, are doing well there. They like to be there. So a thought that I had is, while still maintaining plenty of beach access for your clients, building that area up more on the south side, on the east side. Maybe doing a little less up near the condos and filling in more around where those turns are, because you've had to close it off anyways, for at least for this year, and building more on that southeast side. But that's just a thought. If the commission wasn't in favor of that, didn't think that that was as important as the west side, then I would go and say maybe a little less on the east and a little more on the west. But I can see the value in both things. So I think you can, with proper mitigation, offset any, I don't foresee much negative impact where the tiki bar is right now. So I think with proper mitigation for that, you can really enhance the habitat on this property.
Thanks,
And
Ian.
I don't know if you want to talk about, it's kind of separate, so maybe we do this first and then have a discussion about the chemical application on the property.
Separate, yeah.
We had just said that we wanted that information by this hearing, so I do have that for you.
And do you have a square footage estimate for the increase in the boardwalk?
I don't, because I'm not really sure if, since we have a plan from the 80s that shows it to the extent that it is, if it is a violation. Or, I don't, if we have a plan that shows it and it's been that way for that long, I don't see it as a violation.
Okay.
So I don't, but, I mean, I'm sure we could find a square footage relatively quickly, measure it if we needed to.
Yeah, we can do that.
That's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
And I did look at, actually, you had sent over a plan. I reached out to, regardless of the plan that Bill Ganchert has, I talked to Andrew Singer.
Yep.
He kind of looked through his files. He pulled out the order from when the the walk was permitted.
Oh, it must have been farther back than I went. I
And,
didn't go through
he
everything
sent
today.
over a plan, but it's a plan it's somewhat dated between the one you sent over to me and the one that he sent me. I do have,
Mhm.
the walkway on the approved plan is shorter, but it's wider. It's 8 feet wide, although it's shorter. The one that exists out there now is only 4 feet wide. So,
Okay.
based on the plan that Andrew Singer sent over to me, it also had sort of a pie-shaped deck extension out. I made it, well, I'll put it up. This is the plan, but I know there's been some later revisions.
Yeah.
And so we have a gap between the one that he sent me and the last one, the most recent one that you sent me. This was the plan that Andrew sent over that actually showed sort of a pie-shaped extension of the deck,
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
the boardwalk. And the boardwalk, as shown here, was about 784 square feet, and the pie-shaped deck was 986 square feet. Overall, it extended 127 feet from the deck that runs across in front of the pavilion here, or the beach bar.
And what year was that one planned?
This was from 2000, this was January 11th, 2011, that's the date of this plan.
I went back to the early 2000s, and I don't know if that was a plan we approved or just a plan that was a concept.
Well, the order's dated, or the order was
So it has an
recorded
order?
3/21/2011.
And that's the plan of record cited?
It's actually, and that's where I went back and looked, this is what Andrew sent me, all these plans.
Okay.
But the plan that's referenced in the order is a revision dated February 11th,
Okay.
but, which is a plan earlier dated than the one you sent me, which I think, I called it up on my phone. Do you have that plan with you?
Oh, no, I don't.
It's March 15th, 2012.
Right. And I think a lot of the discrepancy came because a lot of these, as Bill was saying, is because of the seasonal use of that structure is when the surveys are done. It's typically in wintertime.
Yeah, it's
When
gone.
it's not in, when it's not out, so.
We pull that out and we put it along the deck to keep the sand from
Yeah.
blowing on.
So this, based on the January
What was permitted
plan,
versus what's there now.
this is what I had now. Again, this is, the green was the January dated plan. The one that's referenced in the order is February 11th. I don't have that plan. And the plan that you sent over to me is dated March of 2012.
Yeah.
So the March 2012 plan, this comes back.
Yeah, I'd
You
say
know,
about
so-
to where the,
It's probably, it's probably a little longer than that, but again, it's 8
if
feet
you
wide.
want to show the chair, you mind
Yeah,
showing the
I actually
chair?
have copies.
That's the one thing I don't, because I was there for the 2011 vote, I don't recall it being 8 feet wide. I thought it was a 4-foot. So I'm curious about
I
that.
could go, well, there's so many files for this. I'd have to, it would take me a few minutes to find the one for this one. I pulled most of them from the basement, and they're upstairs now, but.
One of these is in color, obviously, so.
Thank you.
You can use this one, Paula, if you want, if it's easier. Good. I'll have one for the file, thanks.
Can I appeal to our local expert on the commission who might recall? Is that-
But
I am
Well,
going to
she
abstain from a
can't
vote
speak to
on
it.
this, but
But-
I can,
Mm, Should've-
in my recollection, which started in the early 60s, there has always been a boardwalk, walking down there, just about the same length. Maybe this is a little bit longer, but I couldn't swear to that. I do not ever remember an 8-foot wide
Okay.
walkway.
No, there was never, this boardwalk, I built this boardwalk myself, probably in 90, maybe 80, 89.
Well, there was a wooden one.
This is wooden, this is a wooden one.
Well, this is, I thought this is kind of a composite.
No, this is wood.
This is wooden.
Yeah.
Well, there was
And that's been,
a more rustic wooden one years ago,
yeah, maybe, yeah, before my time.
before you replaced it. But it was approximately this length.
Okay, that's some good longevity.
Well, there was breaks in between, like I wasn't here for the 2011 dealings.
So I think what Bill's saying, no, it's never been more than 4 feet wide, but it looks like it had been permitted wider, so even looking at the shorter plan, the more recent plan from 2012, the one that you have as the latest plan, 8 feet wide, it's about 80 feet, scale's about 80 feet, 640 square feet. What's out there now is about 676 square feet, so it's longer. And again, I think the prime purpose, one of the prime purposes, not only for the guests, but it's also for the mobility impaired. So it gives them some reach, down further on the beach, so.
Okay, so we're not considering any further mitigation based on changes?
No, based on what since
Okay.
my site summary earlier on, we've discovered a little bit more on it, and I think it's enough evidence that
Right.
it's pretty much been the same for a long time.
Is it reasonable that with this process, we document the 4-foot width? Is that?
Yes, I think what we're
Right.
doing now is really trying to set the whole record straight and make sure that that what's on this plan is actually what's on site. And that way, going forward, we have a very clear plan of what actually is here.
Is that reasonable?
Absolutely.
Okay. Yep, because I think our regs really speak to have a 4-foot width for these type of pathways. So it would be a variance if it was bigger. All right, then we can move on from that. So I interrupted everybody. Paula, any comments on the
No.
overall project? No? Carolyn, thank you for your comments.
I'm going to abstain.
I know, thanks. John?
So I'm actually a little puzzled about what this is. This is the current plan with your recollection of what was approved at some previous date drawn on it. Is that
That's
a correct understanding?
There's a colored, one
Well-
colored version that's circulating around, but not my recollection of it. It's what Attorney Singer sent over to me out of his files.
You didn't send this. You
No.
drew what you
No,
got
he
from Attorney
sent-
Singer on this. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I took that
I see.
and put it onto my plan.
All right. But that was never implemented.
No. No, that has never, like I said, never changed for my time, yeah.
Okay, all right. Other than that, the choice you're talking about, Amy, between maybe focusing on where the turn staging area is now, and you're sort of posing that as a choice between that or widening the dune area on the western side of.
Not either or, but maybe, it doesn't have to be one or the other, but
Or,
it's a,
so then what you're talking about is, let's talk about widening the western dune area, forget about the eastern additions and focus whatever would have been there on the turn staging area.
kind of, yeah. So this is not to scale. This is just to show you a little bit. So the turn staging area is over here.
Right.
So this is not to scale at all, but
Oh, I see.
decreasing the width up by the condos and kind of then expanding it a little bit where the turn staging area was, because they seem to like it there. But if this is the first year, that was my other question, is this the first year they've done it?
Yeah.
There's
First
not
year
really
for
a
the
record
turns.
of them using it then. This is a first time. So, but in my mind, this whole dune system over here has a lot more value. So potentially,
It was close.
I think there's value to both ideas. It's up to the commission what you see as the higher wildlife value. in terms of where the mitigation should be exactly.
So,
But I think the strip as proposed originally doesn't really add much to habitat value, and it does potentially block sediment going into the channel a little bit. But I don't think, in terms of us, we're looking to improve the resource area.
You don't care about the boaters.
Create dunes. We do, but not for this project.
but you all already have a fence along there, and the fence is already built up a little dune which should block sediment, right?
Right.
And so extending that westward, why would that help any in
The
sediment?
dune?
Yeah,
or-
isn't that what you're talking about?
I'm
Is-
saying extending it westward would purely be for wildlife habitat.
Right, it wouldn't actually enhance the ability of that dune area to block sediment migration into the Witchmere Channel there.
Right.
Yeah, the
So
only part
what's
that
the-
would be is maybe this little section very at the bottom that you're proposing to extend, when you're proposing to extend the fence. This, but not much.
Well, but the wider it is, there's more beach grass, and it's gonna slow down
Right.
the wind-blown sand more, so it is going to have
Yeah,
benefit. Being wider is beneficial
yeah.
to the decelerating and causing the sand to
But also a way
Deposit.
also a way to prevent that in the winter time, which
Yeah,
you
which we do. Yeah.
is
Snow
putting up
fence.
sand, snow fence anyways. So that's a way to prevent, another way to prevent sediment from getting into the channel during the winter.
It might help the growth of our beach.
You don't need help in that
Yeah, I
department,
know.
you're getting a lot.
Yeah, so currently the majority of the planting area here is on the eastern side, right? It's just,
Yeah, a larger amount. Is on
About
this.
75%-ish.
yeah, I actually, I'm not sure how to make that call myself. I'm not sure that I favor one thing as opposed to another. I mean, I have sort of a gut feeling, which I don't know if it's accurate, that a more sort of contained area would be more beneficial for wildlife habitat than a thin strip.
Mhm.
I guess that's my bias. So maybe I'd favor sort of moving in that direction.
Towards the west is what, or, or more,
wider.
going more into that.
oh,
turn
more of
area.
a
Yeah, right.
bowled out area
Back.
there. Okay?
Oh, and I have just another question. I sort of think it went by me a little too quickly, but you were talking about winter storage of the boardwalk,
Mhm.
which goes where?
We put it along the deck that's on this, on the south side of the retaining wall there.
You put it on the deck?
No, we stand it up along the face of that deck to keep the sand from filling the deck. We get a dune that rises up over the top of keeps the sand on the beach. Or it helps keep the sand on the beach.
Okay.
Well, I guess I was hoping to see a larger area left to naturalize. The thing that we're not really talking about right now is, well, this, if left alone for a year, would be a natural dune system with huge habitat value, and you see that even when you put the fence around it for a few months, the vegetation comes right back. You have beach grass, you get some topography to it. It's maintained, it's graded and raked, and any vegetation is removed constantly through that process. Having been there in the spring, we saw where the plovers were, there was already dune vegetation there, and that's all been raked and graded out. So there essentially isn't much habitat value to this whole, even though it's 3 acres of what is technically coastal beach, right? Is that what it is? It would naturally be dunes. There really isn't much value to it because it's maintained as something that's just a manicured sand surface. So I think there's a huge value to letting a portion of this naturalize. I think there's almost 3 acres of beach here, which is, you know, can certainly handle a huge crowd. So I was hoping to see a larger area, and I think the area that's where the turns are now would be a good spot for that. Realistically, I don't know if the Tiki Bar is having any effect at all, because the whole thing is so manicured, it's not actually habitat anyway, but it's an opportunity here to create some habitat. The beach has expanded even, you know, year to year. We're gaining, you know, hundreds of square feet per year, and it's a huge beach, and it's manicured, so there's no habitat value to it, unless occasionally it's fenced off for birds. So I'd like to see it a larger area.
You favor the east side?
I think so, being there today. I mean, I think, actually, I don't really mind. It could be in the middle, it could be in the east, it could be in the west, just a larger area. It's just such a large beach at this point. It's one of the largest beaches on the, you know, the South Shore at this point. When you look at a manicured beach like that.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Amy, your proposal doesn't take square footage away from the western section, does it?
Not as currently proposed, it's up to you,
Yeah.
what you want to do. I will just make a note, so our regulation reads at least a 4-to-1 ratio. So there is some, the commission does have some ability to.
We generally don't approve things in a resource area.
Exactly, so that's what, I mean, this is kind of a very special circumstance if we were to consider this.
It's a good opportunity to actually create some
Yep.
habitat.
I agree.
So, do you have any idea what the size of the currently fenced-in turn staging area is?
Not really, I mean, we'd have to
Measure it,
survey
yeah.
it, we'd have to measure it. We can look at it and, we'd have to map it, actually, to know where that is and what its size is.
Yeah, I don't know offhand. I
Um,
think it is.
Just to get a realistic
eventually
handle on
guess.
how much that area is.
I have a question. Did the plover, were there plovers there this year?
Yeah, originally it was the
And
plovers.
in the same area?
No.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, there was a nest that never
right.
made it, yeah.
The first nest was pretty much straight out from the boardwalk,
Right.
and
Oh,
you
really?
fledged 2 from that, right?
There was
Yeah,
two.
the first 2 that survived in
Yeah.
5 or 6 years,
Yeah,
which is good.
Good, keep
I
it
guess.
going.
Yeah.
yeah.
But
So
yeah, there was
there's
a nest here, and then they
little-
tried to nest over on the
Little
way.
commonality between the plovers and the terns in that area.
Just, yeah, usually they're in the spot where Amy was pointing out. That's the usual spot
Right in
for
the
them.
middle.
Would it be more beneficial if there was grass there? Would they migrate over
I
to the
think that
grass?
well, the other thing, plovers are funny birds because they like a little bit of grass, but not too much
Yeah.
grass. They like a little bit of slope, but not too much slope. So,
That's another point I would make, is that the planting of the grass is not necessarily what I would consider. Simply leaving it with, what do you call it,
Symbolic
symbolic
fencing.
fencing to the
And the
point.
grass will eventually,
Well,
And
it'll
other-
be a
other
mixture of
species
grass
and-
and other dune plants.
Yeah.
And
Succulents and. there's
yeah,
all
you wouldn't
kinds.
necessarily want to just go pack in beach grass
no,
there.
no, but what would grow naturally would be a good thing for
Yes.
both of them.
and
Yeah.
maybe it's planting a little bit, but to help it establish a little bit, but not 12 inches on center, a
Right.
diamond pattern or something.
Right.
There's already beach grass growing
Right.
Right.
the fences right now.
Right.
Just from a few months of not raking.
That's good.
Yeah.
There's probably a seed bank on that entire beach just full of dune.
Mhm.
It's just the fact that it's
Then-
raked every
Yeah, so
week
you
or
may not need
whatever,
to, you
but-
may just need to leave it alone.
Just leave it
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah, if it's not trampled too, the human factor tramples
Yeah.
everything too. We get
Well,
quite
that's why, I mean,
quite
even,
a traffic.
It would be a matter of some sort of symbolic planting
Mm.
or fencing
Yeah.
to create this area. But,
have you noticed, just out of curiosity, I mean, since you put the turn fencing up, what has been the response from people at the club, if any?
To that side, not much. Condo owners have mentioned it when it's going away, but Now, the club members typically are on
The other
their
side,
side,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, once in a while they'll stray, but
Mhm.
typically not.
Well, and like I said, like it could even be kind of in the middle, maybe that would let the
Divide.
condo owners have their kind of
Mm.
area, whatever. It's not that important to me exactly where it is, but.
Where it is.
How about if we did two things on either side, east and west? You know?
So I think what I'm hearing is the commission's in general in favor of a little bit more,
Mm-hmm.
or just more in general. Location to be determined. Me personally, I don't see much of a value of putting it up here.
Right.
So focusing it along there, more towards the water.
So doesn't it make more sense not to break it up? I mean, whatever the area is that's gonna go there, isn't it more beneficial to have it all consolidated in one place or not?
Leave it connected, yeah, probably.
I like having enhancement on both sides, actually, because I think if you protect it, then it can grow on its own, or at least add value on its own. It's a large amount. It's a large amount of square footage, so I do favor, you know, I think Amy's idea, I think I like a lot, but maintaining something to the west as well. And I don't think it's very practical to put something in the middle. From a habitat standpoint, it might be, but probably not from use.
Mm.
Yeah, I kind of got that idea, because when we went there in the spring, there
Yeah.
was probably a
That's
half
the
acre
plover, yeah.
fenced in for the plovers, and it had already become vegetated and it actually seemed kind of functional, but.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, I'd like to see the scale of the whole thing, to me, suggests a larger amount of naturalization.
Is it appropriate to ask for a 5-to-1? I mean, we need to put something, you know, put our intentions on the table.
I mean, this is for a violation, not, which we wouldn't normally approve, period. We don't generally approve, I want to put a bulkhead in where this wetland is, or whatever. So I was hoping to see a proposal of something like 30,000 square feet.
So
Maybe
That's
it's
like
something-
15-to-1. That's,
Yeah.
I don't think that's
Yeah, it's-
equitable. I mean, I think we're talking about something more than the 4-to-1. We can certainly map what that area is, sort of determine that area, and come back to you. Once we get that mapped up, maybe we can meet.
Yeah, we can meet
with
together
Amy,
and see.
Kind of work out,
Area.
sort of what that square footage is, and
Try.
and take a look at what the proposal is. But yes, this is a violation. It's an unpermitted structure, but we did, when we met informally, if that structure's not there, that area is getting heavily used. There's people walking through it. There's no, it's not that it really changes functionally what goes on in that location. And then, really looking at, and I did include that in the notice, and I don't really necessarily need to probably go through that. But when you look at what the performance standards are, yeah, agreed, this is on a resource area. But you look at what are the impacts of the project and what the performance standards are, particularly for work on a beach, and what can be, say, permitted, or what the performance standards are for that. It can't change the shape or read into it. Work on a coastal bank will not increase erosion, decrease the volume, or change the form of the coastal beach. That's the performance standard. And I would suggest whether that seasonal deck is on the beach or it's not impacting the beach in any of those ways. So I think it's a permittable thing on in that location. And agreed, it's unpermitted at this time, and we're trying to.
However, what you left out of what you just mentioned in the regulations is you're also can't interfere with viable habitat. And you can't really argue, based on what's been pointed out here, that any use of that beach automatically interferes with habitat, because if you leave it alone, the habitat will come back. And so you have put a structure there in the coastal beach where if you had left it completely alone, there would have been habitat growing in there. And that's in the regs as well, and it's also a point that we have to take into account. In fact, you're raking the whole beach, as Jim is pointing out, and interfering with the appearance of habitat on the entire beach.
They have a permit to do that.
Okay,
So do
well,
the raking.
but still, the point is, what you put in there is in fact interfering with habitat. And you did it without consulting the Conservation Commission, and we're trying to figure out how to mitigate that.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, we're acknowledging the fact that it's unpermitted. There's no, there's no question about that. And again, I just would like to sort of restate, this goes in June and is taken out after Labor Day. I don't think Habitat is building during the busy summer season when everyone's using the beach. Maybe the Habitat might want to build in the off-season, but that's not when the deck and boardwalk are there. So nonetheless, we've talked about getting a bigger mitigation area, and we'll look at that. We'll survey that area, and we'll come back to the commission with a proposal on that.
Okay,
So,
further thoughts?
no further thoughts for me.
Okay,
So we continue them to a date certain.
yep.
Would you prefer 2 weeks or a month?
Well, you're going to want revised plans a week before or something like that?
It can be a little flexible, but I would definitely need them, I would say the Friday morning before, so I can say, 5 days in advance.
Yeah. What do you think? Should we put it out a month?
Probably.
We'd like to go out to your second.
September 4th?
Yeah, I guess that'll be it.
September 4th, okay. All right, well, I move that we continue this hearing until September 4th.
Just, I don't know, do you want to talk about the other part?
Yeah, after we continue. Yep.
Did I get a second from you, John?
Sure.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll
One
continue.
abstention.
One abstention.
Extension.
Okay.
All right, so if we can, while they filed this notice of intent, they were to, or in time for this meeting, they were to have gotten us a chemical application data of what's going on the property, as well as proposed fertilizer management plan or elimination. The orders of conditions for your beach club renovations said that you had to either comply with our new regulations or get an approval from the Conservation Commission for what you're doing or propose to do. So in your packets and in Dropbox, there should be a fertilizer management plan. What I did ask of Mr. Ganchert was, he's talking about a reduction, but we don't know what the current use is. So today on site, he gave me something from McNamara Brothers, who does your landscape, or your chemical application. This is for the entire property of 23 Snow Inn Road, correct? 75 pounds of nitrogen per application at 5 times a year, which is 375 pounds of nitrogen per year. It's a little, so I think I was hoping for a little bit more. I mean, is there anything else in that? Is it phosphorus that's in there too? Typically, it's like a lot of fertilizers are 10-10-10 or something like that. And what is, yeah, so.
Actually, he did give me I should have brought that with me. He
I
did give me the chemical sheets on that product that he uses.
Yeah, it would
And-
be helpful to know what's being used there if we're talking about eliminating or reducing it.
Okay,
So I don't think that's enough.
okay. I can get that information to you.
Okay. And then I think I'd like to reach out to I mean, saying you're doing it 5 times a year and you're gonna reduce to 20%, if the commission wants me to, I can reach out to some professionals as well, because I still don't know if that is more than what needs to be done. So I'll let you guys speak and talk about your feelings on this.
Okay. Thanks, Sammy. Paul, do you want to start?
You know what, I don't know anything about fertilizers, so I'm gonna pass it on to those that are more
Okay.
experienced.
Yeah, I don't have much myself. John?
So, first when I saw that sheet today, and I took it as 75 pounds of fertilizer, but you're stating it as 75 pounds of nitrogen.
It's nitrogen.
75 pounds of nitrogen 5 times a year. Okay, and so I think it's, I mean, Amy asked whether there's phosphorus in there, but my other question is whether there's herbicides and other things, and from the look of the lawn there's gotta be herbicides there, because again,
No
it's just a
weeds.
monoculture of
There's
turf
weeds,
grass.
but,
And, I mean, my initial gut reaction, without having any of the numbers, there aren't enough numbers there to really understand what's going on, except it sounds like an awful lot. My initial gut reaction is that's part of the problem, not part of the solution. And, you know, the town is trying to reduce the nitrogen in saltwater estuaries, and you guys are pouring tons of it onto your lawn. And we're all paying for that, and I really think you need to try to do more. And I also just comment that in your narrative in there, you have stated in the past, and you stated this time, that you need to feed the turf grass in your parking areas because it's a permeable surface, and you need to feed it to keep it strong for the cars. But I guess I would just make a point that turf grass is not the only permeable surface you could be using for your parking area, and if it requires pouring tons of nitrogen on there and adding to the excess nutrient problems we have in the saltwater estuaries, then perhaps you should rethink what the parking area is made out of. So that's my thought.
Thank you, John. Jim?
Yeah, I wouldn't be in favor of accepting this as the solution. It's not, you know, it's a very strict, clear regulation we haven't wavered on at all so far, as far as anything other than it's an actual prohibition within the 100-foot buffer zone on all fertilizers, herbicides, insecticides, pesticides, fungicides. Now, you know, I was somewhat open to some larger scale solutions to maybe compromise on some of this parking area in the middle. That would have been like something like a naturalization of areas near the water, creating a meadow or whatever to absorb some of all this stuff before it gets into the harbor. But it would have to be something pretty significant for me to be slacken, to be in favor of slackening that regulation. It's so important. We're trying to get those regulations maybe even town-wide, or, you know, people are working to, it's just such a problem. And the Herring River was bright green the other day.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what's happening, and just for aesthetics, you know. So I wouldn't be in favor of a minor reduction like that.
I have a question. What about something like crushed rock instead of grass? I know it's not preferable to the feet, but when we built our house, we were told that it had to be permeable, and it was suggested that crushed rock would be, it's not the best.
tough to maintain, snow removal.
It is, but is your club used a lot during the winter?
No, not a lot.
So, I mean,
They
for
do
us,
have weddings
it's
and
tough. My
that
husband has to rake it back, but something like that would probably eliminate all of the fertilizer. Doesn't have to be crushed rock, but something.
Mhm.
It also, these regulations aren't just for lawns, it applies to, it just simply applies to the 100-foot buffer
The,
zone.
yeah, area in our jurisdiction.
Gardening or anything like that.
Just a side point, I'm in favor of reducing the chemical application too, but when you're talking, just so the commission knows, you know, this property has to go to site plan review, all that stuff, and you're talking about site coverage requirements of hardscape and things like that. So they may not, depending on what the other methods of, or place things to park on are, other boards too. I mean, it has nothing really to do with us, but it's another factor that they, you know, if you have different types of surfaces, it creates other complications. So,
We had a project that on Herring River there, they proposed and were permitted, they did a section of their driveway with a product that grass grew in between.
right, yep, right. So
it
there's
ends
other
up-
options.
It ends up looking like a lawn, but it actually is like this kind of honeycomb product that.
You have grass, babe.
Yeah,
right?
but just,
Yeah.
yes, and that's what you
Yeah.
have.
Yeah, we
That's
do.
what they have in some of their areas. You wouldn't know that it's a matrix. Yeah,
Yeah,
they
it's
have it.
structured.
It,
that is a
it gives it some structure, but
Right.
it's still, it's still topsoil and grass.
Right, right.
Yeah, but so I mean that, you
Yeah.
know, whether or not that will work out for them, that was not permitted to have any, it was actually prohibited to have any fertilizers
Yeah.
applied to that system that they were
Which one was
permitted to
that?
install.
Which one was that?
The big job right at the beginning of Herring River.
Turner?
Yeah, with the dock and the.
Oh, Turner's, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was their lower driveway.
all right.
Well, I think there's options, but,
Yeah.
you know, the last project that was here, they were doing a revetment, and now they're
Mhm.
gonna have to oversee their lawn with native mix and cease the use of those fertilizers,
Yeah.
so.
So I think some way of, you know, weaning off of this and going to a more, something different, maybe it's an approach to talk with your contractor about. I'm
alternative.
happy to be involved in that, or I'm happy to reach out on behalf of the commission to see what a proper way of substantially decreasing or eliminating would be over time.
Maybe we could start with talking with McNamara and then possibly getting
Yeah.
with Amy
Mhm.
and getting, you know, getting the conversation a little further along
I think so,
and then go from there.
yeah.
We're all in the same boat. I'm not a fertilizer expert. And so it makes sense to get McNamara involved and a professional go from there. I do know just through a number of projects that I've been involved with. The important thing is the application of nitrogen and the other things that you're concerned with. Certainly, homeowners are the biggest abusers because homeowners tend to over-apply. If it says apply at this rate, everyone applies it at more than that rate. So you end up with more leaching into the groundwater. It would be interesting to see what the professionals say and what it shows. When they apply it professionally, that was the point I was trying to make in the narrative. They know the proper time of year to apply certain things in the proper, at the proper application rate, because it costs a lot of money to have a professional fertilize, and if it's just getting wasted, that's just wasted money. Forget the environmental impact as well. But, so the idea is, how much is, when it is applied properly, I know Cape Cod Commission, when we do the calculations for them, on their projects, they say 25% of the applied nitrogen leaches, the rest is uptaken. I don't know what the basis of that is. I've got to believe that if it's being professionally applied, it's less than 25% because they want it to get to the plants. I think that's what maybe McNamara needs to look
We just
at
need some more clarification.
and provide better information on. I'm just kind of going from my experience. And I do, and just the one other thing, and again, certainly fertilizer management can have a big impact. I know, I live in the town of Brewster. The Captain's Golf Course was one of the contributors to Pleasant Bay, and they changed their fertilizer program such that it pretty much resulted in, what the nitrogen reduction was. It was a big impact. So they changed their program. I don't know what that program is. Maybe we could get some information on what that was.
It's a good point. I might
But it
speak
was a
with our
huge
turf
reduction.
manager over at Cranberry Valley because they've drastically changed their practices. They're still in the process of changing their practices, but yeah, he's an expert when it comes to this stuff too, just to give us a little bit of background on it.
Cranberry looks beautiful. I mean, it
Even
has,
after the tornado?
Once you get the trees out of there.
you can't,
Yeah.
I thought it was out of turf. But it hasn't hurt them at all as far as the grass quality.
Yeah, I mean, they're still using
I've
it.
actually been very concerned about the amount of fertilizer going on at Cranberry.
Well, just know that it's better than it used to be.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Change is hard here, I think. And what we're asking you to do, what I'm asking you to do, I'm not trying to speak for my fellow commissioners, is to consider real change here. And from my point of view, real change doesn't mean fine-tuning the amount of fertilizer you put on the turf grass. It's rethinking what you plant in order to be able to maintain a landscape that's pleasing to you and satisfies your clients, but doesn't add any poisons or extra nutrients. And it may be that in theory there's 25% that gets leached out, but in practice it rains after people fertilize or stuff gets washed, and I would be really surprised if anybody can apply fertilizer where only 25% of the fertilizer gets leached in. But I don't know, I'm not an expert, I don't have those numbers. And what we're asking other people to do is not plant plants that need to be fertilized in the 100-foot buffer. And I guess that's what we're asking you to do as well. And your response has been, well, we're going to reduce the amount of fertilizer we put on the existing turf grass. And I guess I'm not particularly happy with that.
It's a big undertaking to get rid of that
I understand.
turf grass.
Well, I get it. I understand.
So you understand why we're,
I understand, and you understand where we're coming from too. So we have to come
Oh,
and
and
get a little closer here, I guess, is what's going on.
Okay, any specific details for what we want in the plan? We want time of application, number of applications?
They do say
what?
what they have here is 5 times a year, but it says nitrogen, so I'd like to be a little bit clear about what's going on.
okay.
Not just in terms of fertilizers, but as John
The
stated, in
products.
terms of what the products are that are being, any chemical
Did you get
products that are being
65?
applied.
It's just like a one-liner.
Oh,
It's not
Yeah.
in there.
Sorry, no, it was given to me today,
yeah,
Brad.
I didn't see that.
Nope,
Okay.
I got it at the end of the
Yep.
day. So, a little bit, just more clarification about, well, one, I'd really like to be, you have a lot of grass, but you also have a lot of hardscape there. So, what is the, kind of the area that what's the size of the area that they're doing with this amount, essentially, you know?
Oh, okay. What's the square footage of the grass area?
Roughly, yeah, I mean, if they calculate that this is what they're using, they must kind of
No,
know
have
what
an
that
idea.
area is. And then, basically what's in it, what time of year, why, I think a reason why would be good. And then we'll go from there, plans to reduce
Mhm.
drastically with the goal of, I mean, it doesn't have to be, maybe the commission, we can talk about
Alternatives.
phasing.
I'm all
or
for alternatives, because
I said phasing.
it's not easy keeping that grass.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I mean, obviously we want whatever happens to be successful,
Mhm.
so. So maybe we'll talk about this again when you're here for for September 4th.
I think that would give us some
Yeah,
adequate
give us
time
time.
to get with McNamara, then maybe meet with Amy, and then come back with more information to the commission.
Chris McNamara also mentioned a guy from Lesko, an expert from Lesko, was willing to come in and speak.
Okay. I don't know.
Maybe fill us in a little more on fertilizers, and
Yeah,
if that's, I'll talk to him.
yeah.
Could we gather the Cape Cod Commission's recommendations? 'Cause I think they have recommendations on square footage and things like that.
It might be the cooperative extension,
Okay.
but yes, I will look for any county information that's
Maybe
out
the
there.
cooperative extension.
Okay.
Cooperative extension. I know APCC is putting out a lot of stuff now too on landscape management, so.
Okay.
All right,
Sounds
so we
good.
don't need to vote on that because it's a discussion.
All right, thank you.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Till next time.
Got a couple of changes in plans, unless we do have, one of the owners for one of the orders of conditions is here, if you wanted to do that.
Let me just ask about the change of plan. Do we have a representative here for that?
We
or-
do not.
Okay.
For
so-
either that or the extension, we do not. I
Okay.
was gonna speak to it, it's fairly
Well,
minor.
then let's take the one that's up.
Right, so this would be an orders of conditions for 27 Soundview Road. We've drafted the conditions for you to review.
I went through them and didn't pick up any recommended changes.
I looked at them at home and didn't pick up anything either.
One thing we discussed on 27 Soundview was moving is it Clethra, I think they had planting line back to the limit of work.
Yep.
And that's in the minutes, but it's not in the.
It's number 5.
Oh, it is.
Because the limit of work, I mean, I got the revised plan that they had the small one of last time, I got the big copies of it, so.
That's now what's
Along the
attached.
That
limit
is
of
now
work
what's
line,
attached.
okay,
Yep.
I'm sorry, okay, great.
I'm like, I hope I didn't miss that, that was a big thing.
Yeah, well, it's my bad reading, I guess. All right.
While you're reading, I'll ask any comments from the proponent. No? Okay.
Okay,
Okay, any comments, or, okay, let's have a motion, please.
I move to approve the order of conditions for 27 Soundview Road.
Okay. Seconded by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
thank you.
Sure.
You're welcome.
Good luck.
This will go to Ryder and Wilcox. Paul, the original goes to Ryder, they'll record it for you, okay? So please sign. You wanna go
Amy,
back?
Did you need this, the colored one?
I would love that,
Yeah, the
yes.
original, yeah.
'Cause when I have a minute, I am going to go back to all those plans, because
We didn't approve the 8-footer in 2011.
No. I think this was proposed, and it was further revised, maybe to this, but I found plans I pulled plans from 2011, 2012, and then I pulled a plan today from 2004. And none of them showed this configuration. The plan that he had from the 80s does. So I didn't go back as far as the 80s, I didn't have time to do that, but I will. Should we go back to the order that everything was in?
Yeah, 5 Salt River Lane.
Yep. So if you recall, this was the one that had the fiber rolls that were installed illegally, and then they got after the fact approval for that, and then they got their revetment. What they want to do here really is very minor. I know it may not sound it with retaining wall, but basically it's, so did you see the narrative from the engineer? It really explains it really better than I can. I view them as cosmetic changes with no additional square footage of hardscape. The retaining wall essentially is like a wall, not like, it's actually not holding anything. It's more of a privacy wall that's in between columns of the deck. But because there were several little changes, I said I didn't want to do it administratively.
The bump out on the existing patio where the fireplace is proposed, we authorized that little bump out,
We did.
yeah? Before we were talking 60-foot line, I guess.
Hold on a second. Let me check something really quick. There is no bump out anymore on the
Okay.
site.
It's, well, the photo
But we
looks-
did authorize it, but it's not there.
Okay.
And then a proposed privacy wall
Yep.
is not considered an increased structure?
No, because there's a, in my mind, and this is where it shows, right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Between
looking
two
at.
posts. You have a deck above that, it's in between two posts, there's kind of a curbing there to begin with. I didn't consider it any increase in structure, if you will. Say a curbing
But
and a deck above it.
the extent of this privacy wall is only between those two
Only between the
poles?
posts.
There's another
Yep.
pole farther down to the
Nope.
right?
It's just that one.
Just that?
Oh,
10
sorry, no, it is the next section too, farther down.
So down to the next pole.
There's a gap where, well, it's on the other side of the patio. I'm sorry, that bump out is there, but we did approve that. I can see it now in this photo. And it's not even, it's not gonna extend all the way to the ground either. It's really just boards. So-
Okay. So animals can pass 6 inches above, 9
I
inches
don't
up?
know, I mean, I didn't view it as anything more impactful, because there's,
It's really under
yeah,
the deck,
Deck.
which was pre-existing,
yeah.
right? So we'd view it different, I think, if it was a new structure, we would, but it is under the deck.
Yeah, right.
So it seems like it could potentially impair the view looking out of the basement windows, but
I know, I was thinking that.
you've been down to the site, Amy, and
Yeah, I walked it with them.
it doesn't have a cert yet, right? But you've checked it out?
No, the plantings are gonna take like a while to establish
Right.
there. They haven't done most of them yet. As far as like the little bit of a, on the side of the house, there's a little bit of a wall, where currently there's gravel that goes down, like a gravel pathway on the side of the house. And it just, every time it rains, it washes out and gets down farther on the bank. So they do wanna put in a minor little retaining wall there, nothing high, just on grade, to keep that contained.
And we already approved the gas fireplace?
Yes, it was in the patio. Because that patio, it was existing prior, so. Yeah, I thought it was more than I should approve administratively with all the little things, but this would make it the official plan of record.
Yeah, I agree, Amy. Yeah, it's a project where I would have liked to get a little more naturalization of the bank when it happened. This is the way it went. We approved it, so these look to me like pretty minor adjustments that don't really affect any performance standards or resources. That's my feeling. Any other thoughts?
It's fine with me.
Okay. Well, I move we approve the request for a change in plans for 5 Saltwater Lane.
I'll second.
Second that by Carolyn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Next, we have a extension request. So this was a big project on Pleasant Bay. It was a tear down rebuild. And it was permitted in 2015. Last year, they asked for a 1-year extension to complete construction and finish plantings. The construction is now complete, and the restoration planting, most recently as of this spring, is now 95% done. A lot of the ones they planted at first didn't take. They actually have a new contractor on board since then, and I've met with them on site. They're making a diligent effort at finishing it up, but we do have the condition that they have to stay alive for 2 growing seasons and be replaced. So technically that would, another year should suffice, but they have every intention of the last bit of being done this fall, but they wanted a 2-year cushion in case they run across a similar issue and with survivability. So I've inspected the house, the footprint and all the other conditions they are complying with. They're doing a beautiful job on the plantings. It really is spectacular, very natural. So I would recommend a 2-year extension. So not only do they put the plants in, but they make sure that they're doing well. They have consistently supplied their monitoring reports on that. And that's how we kind of knew last year that things weren't working out. It's
Any
a severe
comments?
slope. There's a clay
No,
layer there.
sounds
It's kind
admirable.
So the extension's really just for the plantings?
to finish. Most of them are in. They just want to make sure they do well.
We've been scrutinizing some of these extensions lately, but in this case, they seem like they came to Amy.
Yeah.
They were doing everything they needed to do, and so it seems reasonable.
For some reason, the first round of plantings, they had a really poor survival rate. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't give them a certificate of compliance either way.
And
Do
like
they
we
even
talked
need-
about
do they even
before,
need an extension to just finish making sure
technically
they're
they
planted?
should, because it's hard for us to, say for instance, they seem like diligent owners, but say for instance the property sells, it's a little bit harder to make sure if you don't have an active, even if it says ongoing conditions,
Keep the-
it comes off the deed, it doesn't show up as easy.
Keep the permit active.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where are the planting failures on the bank?
They were mostly, no, they actually didn't propose much on the bank itself. It was mostly buffer zone to top of coastal bank. They did correct some of the oaks that the previous owner had incorrectly pruned, and I've coppiced them to make them have a dominant leader, so that's working. There's like a gully area there on the site that they had to replant.
This is the one that's almost to the town beach?
It's almost to the town line. It has a vernal pool in front, like towards the road.
It's on the east side of
Yeah.
Crown Cut? Or the
Yeah,
northeast side?
it's next to
It's
community boating.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's on the
Can see
northern
it from the
property
parking lot.
line.
Community boating.
Yeah.
it's the property immediately south of Pleasant Bay Community Boating. They have a vernal pool, then the house up on the hill, and then the slope down to the bank. A lot of the stuff actually near the vernal pool did very well. That's what did do well, that they planted.
Sounds like that's the way to go. Extension.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and move that we approve an extension for 2 years for 2267 Head of the Bay Road.
Second.
Second that by Jim. All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay, here's that one. Please sign. Do the orders for 25 Gray Neck Lane.
Mhm. Didn't think this would be a quiet meeting.
Lately, it's like, doesn't look good, like it's gonna be quiet until like a day or two before.
Right.
It will catch up with us.
Oh, boy. Great. I'm gonna take a super quick break and be right back.
Yep.
I have no comments on Gray Neck Road order.
Anybody else have any comments on 25 Gray Neck order?
That's the one that has the other property between it and the
Yes.
wetland, yeah.
That was kind of, it was kind of screwy to have to write up, because I don't really know.
Yeah, I think the language is pretty good. Saying that it's meant to be a living fence and,
I mean, this is, you're right, so the area is to remain in its natural state, but this is being recorded on this property. I mean, I'm gonna send a copy of this order to that other property owner, but it's not like she has to have it recorded. Obviously, if they were to have do any activity within that 50-foot buffer that's on their property, it'd be a violation without a permit. But she's not an applicant of this, so it's kind of, it was hard to, I don't know how we're gonna make it stick. For this owner, it'll prevent this owner.
yeah,
From doing it.
I think I made that motion and I had said that, you know, there shall be no access to mow the
Right.
other property
By
through
this.
this property.
Correct. Mhm.
Didn't you say something about putting in a living?
That's
there.
that's
It's
in here,
there,
that's
right.
in the plan. I mean, it seems like it was, you know, hopefully they'll put in the plantings and
Yeah.
not.
And they won't touch it anymore, yeah.
I thought after so many years of use, it reverts to the people that are using it.
That's a civil thing for them
Ah.
to discuss. I believe
It
it's
has, I
25.
know it's
I
nothing
believe
in our
it's,
purview. I thought it was 17
I
years.
think it's 25, but I'm not sure.
I know it's not our purview, but
Yeah.
it's something they should look into. Because I've owned it for a lot of years.
Yeah, essentially adverse possession.
Huh?
What's it
Yeah.
called, adverse possession?
Adverse
Yeah.
possession.
Exactly.
And they've owned this house for at
For
least
a
that
lot
long.
of years, yeah.
My daughter partied there a lot.
Since as, you know, if you go out to inspect in 3 years, it should be all.
It should be
grown
naturalized,
Right.
and everything.
yes.
Yeah.
We all set?
All right.
We're all set for a
Yeah.
motion.
Need to-
Oh, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the order of conditions for 25 Gray Neck Lane.
I'll second.
Second that by Carolyn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, please sign. Oh, certificates of, we are getting a lot of small things done today, certs of compliance, these things.
Mhm.
Cert of compliance for Arthur and Judy Winterhalter, 20 Rogers Road. Okay, I'm gonna see what it was, actually, Nikki went out to see this, so this was construction of a new single-family dwelling. Everything appears to be in compliance, she recommends approval. Back then, there's really not much for special conditions.
How old was the, what was it?
20 years old,
20?
22 years old.
Okay, so yeah, it's just catching up on an old one.
Yeah. I mean, there were things like roof runoff down into downspouts and dry wells, so she checked that. Cesspool is pumped and filled, so things like that were done.
I'd be kind of curious if there's a, a larger project that was only 3 years old, to visit that at a site visit one time.
Yeah, we should do that.
Just so we have a reality of what these mitigation plantings are looking like.
Mm-hmm, sure.
The older ones, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, but to
really,
see what 3 years looks like.
Yeah.
Sure. I can think of a couple.
Are we doing these individually or as a group?
She's recommending approvals for all of them, so if you want, we can do them together.
Might as well.
So, do you want me to rattle them off, Brad, or do you want to do it?
Well, the only question I had was for Zero Deep Hole Road. I don't know what that is, because I don't think, I didn't.
That's the boathouse.
That little
Oh,
teeny
yeah, yeah,
boathouse
right.
down on
So
the
that's
pond.
Scanquet
I
Pond, the
visited that
boathouse.
numerous times.
Right, so that's not the address.
That is their legal address,
Well,
Zero
that-
Depot
so the
Road,
trust
of
is-
the parcel.
Oh, the parcel.
That's the parcel
Right.
address, map
That's-
17, parcel A
It's really weird, because
165.
that's not Depot Road at all.
No, it's not.
It's a long ways.
Right,
That's their
I spent
address.
some time with the assessors maps trying
Yeah.
to figure that out, and that is a parcel number on the assessors.
Yep.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Because it's a long ways from Depot Road.
Mm-hmm.
My concern there was that, I really, look at that, I've been there twice, it looks bigger. So you've matched
We
it
have
up?
an as-built, and I've measured it myself.
Okay.
We have an as-built, plan.
About like the old one was basically, there were, I think, maples and whatnot, kind of all over it, so it really hit it pretty well. Is that stuff being allowed to grow back?
It is, yeah. They pruned what they had to within the confines of the permit. They were actually allowed to go about 6 feet off that side
Right.
because it was so thick. They did that, but yeah, they're letting it all grow back. They're not keeping it pruned.
Did they turn any deck into building?
Not that I,
Because there was decking on the pond side. Is that deck still there?
yes,
Okay.
yeah. I know, it looks deceiving, and I really do think it's because it was so overgrown
Okay.
that it looks bigger.
All right, as long as you confirm that, I'm okay,
No,
because I
we've confirmed with the building department too, because, so the only thing that doesn't quite match up, and it's more of a building issue, is our order says it's supposed to have 3 flood vents, there's only 2. I brought it up to the builder, and he had said there was an error in the plan. The plan really should have only shown that it needed 2 based on the square footage of the structure. Again, that's more of their risk
I don't
and a
see that.
building code risk.
That's not gonna impact resources.
No.
that we're concerned
So,
about.
but that's the only discrepancy that I saw out
Okay.
there.
All right, that was my one question.
Right, so, but maybe for the tape, we should say what the addresses are for all of these if we're voting on them all.
Okay.
So 20 Rogers Road, 2 Glen Rock Road, 10 Island Pond Road, 0 Deep Hole Road, and 3 Witchwood Lane.
Okay, I move that we accept all 5 certificates for compliance.
I'll second.
Seconded, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so I'm coming at you here. Five, please.
That's it.
I have a question for you. Tanzania lemons taste any different than other lemons? I've never seen that
No.
before.
What I liked is the
Tanzania
five-
lemons.
I don't, it's the same. Actually, it's pretty
Knocking
good.
them out.
So we could chat about, we have the Oyster Reef permitting and funding on here. Quick update on a couple other little things for you and then minutes.
And this is, yeah.
Okay.
Stevia.
Natural sweetener.
Yeah.
I've started growing that in a pot in my
You're
house.
kidding.
It's in the mint family or something like that.
It is?
Yeah, I grow it.
And so what do you do? Just
I
put
just
it in?
crumple it up and put it in my, I
Dry
mean,
it,
I,
or just
no,
cut it like a mint?
Mhm.
Yeah, 'cause I use mint a lot.
Just started it, so
Where'd you get the seedlings for that?
I think I ordered them from, I'll have to, it's seed, I planted
Yeah.
the seeds.
That's something to look into.
Northeast Seed, I think, is
Okay.
the company that I ordered them from. Figured I'd give it a shot. It's
Yeah.
working all right.
Yeah, and you know what? It doesn't taste bad, stevia.
Yep.
Want me to go ahead and
Sorry.
talk about the reef under discussion? That's next in line?
Yeah.
Pretty much?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, Nick sent me an email asking about funding for the Oyster Reef proposal for Herring River,
Mhm.
which originated from the commission and is now a proposed project with the Conservation Department and Natural Resource Department.
Mhm.
And she saw the in lieu fee program, which is a State Department of Fish and Game program that receives money from mitigation through the Corps. It's very similar to what we talked about last meeting about having our own in lieu fee
Yep.
mitigation. So it's a proposal. I looked at it. I think it has potential. I'm not certain whether oyster reefs qualify.
Yeah.
It looks like they might, but I'm not certain. And so, for me, I think funding's one issue. The other issue is beginning the permitting,
Yeah.
which we can do really without funding.
Yes, we need to do it.
Right, and so I did have a conversation with Heinz Prof last week. He's ready to initiate the Division of Marine Fisheries permit request for a special permit. He wants to wait until the alum treatment occurs, because he's preoccupied with that. I think that's in September, maybe. So,
I have the start work meeting on Friday,
Yeah.
actually. Let me put that out to a couple of you if you wanna go.
so that's the clock, I think, for that division permit. The notice of intent could really begin anytime. And I think we're dependent on Nick and Amy
Yep.
for their labor and time to begin that process, which is not, it's a notice of intent. It's a fair amount of work. So I guess really, that's the general update. I think the funding question isn't as important as probably starting the clock with the permitting.
Yep.
Because I think the permitting's gonna take a full year, particularly if we need Chapter 91. And so there is some money, I think, that's available from the past mitigation funding. Do you think that's still available?
Potentially, yep.
Yeah.
That'll lead into our next discussion, my next little topic I have to bring up with you about our in lieu fee program,
Right.
potentially. But, yes, also, since implementation would be at least a year out because of permitting, next year it might be a viable CPC project.
Yeah, I think,
Maybe.
I think funding for
For
implementation.
natural resource and
Yeah.
improvements.
I think implementation funding's gonna come.
Yeah.
It's a concept that people like, and so I think, well, the way I drafted it was, there was $6,000 in costs. It could be higher. Yeah, it's a pretty small footprint I'm looking at, but it's.
That's total project cost?
That's for the first year of deployment. You know, you've got materials, you've got seed, a little bit of permitting cost maybe, and,
We're gonna be exempt from a lot of it. If it's a
right,
town project, it's exempt.
but it benefits greatly from town staff
So
assistance.
APCC has a webpage with a list of probably a couple of dozen potential funding sources for generally that kind of project.
Yeah.
I don't know, have you looked at that?
I haven't, but again, I thought we might have had, some portion of that available from the past mitigation effort.
Well, I think some of it could be from the wetlands fund,
Yeah,
not just the mitigation fund, but the actual wetlands fund, which is our revolving fund. Right now, a portion of the notice of intent fees go into a revolving fund that we have. We are limited to spend $6,000 a year out of it. We have about upper 20,000 something thousand in there, it would take, you know, to use more than 6,000 a year, we would just have to request that of the Board of Selectmen.
Yep.
So that's an option. We do have money for things like that.
So I think the funding is gonna come together. I think it's really just starting the permitting process, notice of intent, and then I'll work with Heinz to get the Division of Fisheries permit going, but he needs to, you know, approve and support that submission.
Yeah.
And so that sounds like that'll happen in September. So I think we're in pretty good shape. I guess Nick was.
You will get on that.
Yeah, I think Nick was wondering about the in lieu fee. And so a question for you, Amy, is do you think that we should, the deadline for the pre-proposal is August 31st. And I'm writing 2 of those for my day job, so it wouldn't be hard for me to do that. But there's a lot of process with a new fee. And
What do you need from me?
well, it would be a town proposal, and so somebody in the town would have to approve it, probably Heinz or yourself, or higher.
It
And
might be Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
Which they're on summer schedule right now, so
Right.
I have to check.
so I think what I'll do is, as I prepare these proposals on my own for fish passage projects,
Mm.
I'll read all the language and try to think if it's a good match.
Okay.
And then, if so, I'll try to get that draft to you guys well in advance of the 31st. And I looked for invasive plants with the same thing, and it took a while, but I found it. They don't allow the use of their mitigation funds for invasive plant control. So,
Probably other funding sources for that.
I think so. So that's the status, I think.
Where exactly do you want to put these beds?
The proposal is to have subtidal beds below the 2 bridges, Route 28 and Lower County Road. They would be mid-channel, in the deepest part of the channel, and they would sit on that substrate. I'm also proposing to have intertidal beds under the bridges and under the culture facility, the old Wixon Dock. And so I'm interested in comparisons, trying different things, seeing what works best. And I think that that's something that'll be worked out during permitting, because the permit authorities might have different ideas about the intertidal ones.
Yep.
DMF could decide that they don't really want to have places where people can get access to them,
Right.
because they're closed to harvest in the summertime.
Mhm.
So to me, I don't mind putting that out there and letting the permit process figure those things out. I think the subtitle ones would be approved by everybody.
Yeah, a lot less questions for those.
Yeah, so that, and it's really, as designed, it's a habitat building exercise. It's a recruitment exercise to put more oysters in the river. It's not really a typical put and take type of oyster reef. We're not expecting people to go harvest them, but we're hoping that it'll seed other areas.
You are hoping it will seed other areas?
Yes. That's the goal, is to increase recruitment
Habitat.
in the area. Build habitat for lots of things, and then increase recruitment. Most towns in the Cape are building oyster reefs where there'll be harvest involved.
Right.
And it could develop into that, but initially, I think I want to do a test project to see if it works. If they all die from disease, well, we don't want to spend $50,000 to learn that.
No.
So,
I have a slight conflict with the hope of them reseeding themselves, possibly in front of private property, and then we deny a dock because there's a bed in front of that private property. But we have put that bed there, in effect.
yeah, that's a valid point. We haven't denied a dock yet in the Herring River, for one, and I think oysters are somewhat compatible to dock structures. Most of our concerns have not been oysters, because they'll grow on pilings. And we'll hear consultants tell us that docks are good for shellfish. Well, they're mainly talking about oysters.
Oysters.
I think docks
Okay.
cause impacts to soft shell clams, quahogs, salt marsh. Oysters tend to grow everywhere, so,
So-
and if that situation came up, I would be comfortable having us just discuss it, and it would probably be, an issue that would be considered. I don't think it's something that, it wouldn't be a bad thing to have.
No, it wouldn't be a bad thing,
Yeah.
it would all be a good thing, possibly a little bit of tweaking of our language and our regulations would.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm not concerned about that becoming a negative if there were more oysters around.
I mean, that would be a successful project.
Right, right. And it could happen. We want to see harvest improve ultimately, but we'd love to see it contribute to nitrogen removal. But we recognize it's a very small-scale project, so it's just a start to see what happens. Other towns are really promoting that aspect of this. I think that lawn fertilizer mitigation, it has more potential than a large amount of oysters. You'd have to really put a lot of oysters out there. But it could be, you know, say lawns could be 10% of the problem, or 15, maybe oysters could take care of 5% of the problem. And you add the two together and you're doing something. But I don't want to get away from septic system, we have to move away from septic
We
system.
gotta stop the problem.
Yes, that,
Did anyone else see, so I was at Herring River, Wednesday, or maybe Monday, I was there, and it was green.
Where?
At the herring ladder, between the
Oh,
salt
up
water.
there.
oh,
But even the salt water was bright green.
Mm.
The herring ladder was bright green. The water coming out of the pipe was
out of
bright
the
green.
reservoir.
The entire
Yeah.
reservoir was bright
It
green.
turned. We got a bloom.
Yeah, I
Well,
would
you-
say it's a full.
You know what I saw after the tornado was Witchmere Harbor turned brownish,
Yeah,
nasty color.
mixed it up.
And I see that a lot in May and June, and it happened again after the tornado.
Yeah, I don't know if
So-
it was from the water on the reservoir probably got really stirred up.
Right.
I'd never seen it. It's kind of like a science fiction thing, of the river is bright green.
That's
Yeah.
weird. No, because
What's
when
going
I did the cleanup, it
Yeah, no,
wasn't,
you
the
couldn't-
other day, it in the reservoir, wasn't there,
There
but
was, not even an inch of visibility. In
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Even
so-
the saltwater portion had also,
Huh.
there was that,
great.
So sediments hold a lot, and
Yeah.
when it gets stirred up, so it's not necessarily
Went right
recent
through there.
applications.
Yeah, I would guess it was a stirred up situation
Right.
from.
Yep.
But that nutrient load is there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's in the muck, and so it's
Yeah.
still a problem. With the reef, I'd love to see some assistance from other commission members, but we've talked about whether we want to take away from the voting pool.
Right.
And so, I
In
know.
terms of the permitting, it's just, we will
Yeah.
sit down and do it.
Okay, so I guess it'll be,
It's really won't be that, hopefully won't be that bad. I mean, actually, I'm committed the rest of this week and most of next to catching up on a lot of
yeah,
the stuff that I haven't been able to do because of the spill and then and then the tornado. So,
I picture eventually submitting those first two permits, and then they'll be continued, and they'll be improved, and there'll be discussion, and so I think that process will shape them up a little bit, so.
I got a highway department permit and this permit that we have to work on for the town, so.
Yeah.
We will
Okay.
soon.
So I guess let Nikki know that I'm interested in lieu fee, and I'll pursue it and see if it's appropriate. And if it's not, I'll let you guys know right away.
All right,
And if it is, then maybe I'll prepare that pre-proposal.
okay.
But I'm not as worried about, at this point, a funding
Funding.
shortfall. I think, so I may back away from it if I think it's not really a great match for us. It
Yeah.
does, it
There
has
might be,
no-
and there are potentially other options.
I think there's lots.
For a small scale thing.
I think there's lots. The one thing about in lieu fee, which is kind of good, is they don't require a match.
That is kind of nice.
And,
But on the other hand, our work doing the permitting will count for a match for other programs.
right, I've done it twice before, it's a little onerous. It's, the approval process is a little bit of work, so we may not go that way, but it could be good for something else.
Just real quick, while we're talking about in lieu fee, I sent an email around earlier today. We'll have a more formal discussion of in lieu fee for mitigation at the next meeting. I took what Jim gave me from the town of Barnstable, ran it by the town accountant, and I think there's a fairly simple way. It wouldn't happen officially until, it would have to go to town meeting to amend our revolving fund to include mitigation funding for specific projects. But there is a way that we can, as part of mitigation, if you wanted to do off-site mitigation, if you saw that as a valid way to approve a project that you don't think is gonna have an adverse impact to a wetland, but it's still in that 60 to 100 foot area that they can't mitigate for, there might be other, so there is an avenue that we can explore, so I'll tell you more about that at the next meeting.
Okay, great.
And we got a couple sets of minutes.
I've got one thing on a new business.
Mhm.
I'm just looking for an update on a few fines we issued recently, but we can take that after the minutes, I guess, under new business.
Yeah, basically, they've been issued, all but one has been issued, and that's my plan for tomorrow.
Mhm.
I have yet to hear back from anybody.
From anybody?
Yep.
Okay. The,
Um,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I thought we were on the minutes.
Just to follow up quickly on that, the property at the end of Uncle Vini's that we issued a fine a while ago, I'm not certain that they haven't continued to apply.
I know, they're the ones that I did send something out to.
So that could be a site we revisit.
That could be more. Also, the fence that's on the river there has
Yep.
not been removed. A fine has been issued there, have not heard back from them.
Okay,
And the one that still has to go out is actually a cutting that they've never acknowledged, they've received but never re-acknowledged, they've never acknowledged their fines or enforcement to do a replanting.
yeah.
This is on Bucks Pond, and it's getting to the point where they're gonna have to be served or something.
Right. Do the letters that go out have like a deadline or any notice of
Yeah,
a
I can't
response?
remember, each one was a little different.
Yeah,
Actually, the fine is 30 days,
yeah,
so if you don't, then
okay,
there's more too. It has not been that long yet, I think most of them went out last week, so,
okay. All right, thanks for all that, Amy.
yeah.
Okay, on to the minutes.
Okay, on the December 5th minutes,
Yep,
under Ken and Barbara Weeks, the fourth line down on the first page.
yep.
It is also hard to know how they area, I think that
How
should be
the
the.
area. Yep. Okay.
And on the second page, let's see, it was suggested that he talk with the various harbors in the area, and I think it should be added for possible storage of traps. Other
Yep.
than just the
Got it,
talk to the harbors.
okay.
That's all I saw. But I didn't see the third minute.
Anybody else for December 5th?
I have no comments on December
We
5th.
can do them all together.
Sure.
So how about December 19th, any comments?
I had no comment.
I didn't find any there as well. Are we doing July 17th?
Yes, because it turns out the tape recorder wasn't working, we had a
Oh.
glitch. So I wrote these minutes.
Wow.
Because I wanted to, I write notes about who motions and the make basic things on my cheat sheet here, my site summary. So before I lost it, all knowledge, I typed these up pretty quick. Hopefully I got it fairly accurately.
Wow.
I don't write minutes very often, so if they're bad, I'm sorry.
I'm not picking up any mistakes. Very generous with your language on page 4 at the top. There was a lot of back and forth.
Well, because I couldn't rewatch anything, and I wasn't really taking, if I had known, I would have taken better notes.
No, that's a good way to say it, I think.
There was a lot of back and forth with that applicant.
Yes.
A lot of it fairly redundant.
I didn't put redundant back and forth, but I can
Yeah,
add
but
it if you want.
that covers that.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess we should capitalize Kinnequit Pond in the segment below there. the manual remover of Phragmites in the main text.
Oh, yep, okay, got it. Anything else?
Nope.
So,
All right.
Well, I move we approve the minutes of December 5th, 2018, December 19th, 2018, and July 17th, 2019.
I'll second.
Second that, all those in favor?
Aye.
They all are approved.
Wonderful. Progress.
Under new business, before I forget, do you have a target date for the Phragmites work?
Do not have a target date. Amy and I and Carolyn and Paula went by the herring run, and Amy had a look, and we talked about it a little, and I actually have
Did the permit form real
a
quick.
permit
Oh, yeah, there you go.
for cutting.
Nice.
And Amy also contacted the owner of that lot, and he agreed
Yeah, it's,
that it was okay.
Doug Tuttle.
And
That corner lot.
Amy was suggesting that we could just leave the cutting on site. So,
I mean, it's so infested already, it's basically to clear the run out,
Yeah.
and the run
foot or
is
two on
really,
people side.
really badly clogged at this point, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really,
I think it's an
so,
issue.
you know, people in the Pond Association are available later in the month, and I
Oh,
would like to
that's
find a
nice.
day when you're available
Yeah.
to start with, and Amy was suggesting she might be able to,
I'll rustle up a couple
Rustle up,
volunteers
so-
who have hip boots.
I think it's not, you know, it's a couple 100 feet in there before the Phragmites is gone, so I don't know, I've never done this
So
before.
I measured it on Google Earth, it's a little over 100, it looks like.
Oh, so
So
it's
it's
not even a
really
couple.
not
Yeah.
that bad, if we can get a couple
So-
people before it goes to seed
Right.
to cut it.
I was
So-
thinking 4 to 6 people, 3 hours. That was kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah,
Probably not even 3 hours, but
Yeah.
the roots go?
we're not trying to pull the roots out.
we're just cutting to make sure that the water can still
Clear it out.
flow.
And you're suggesting it should be done a couple times a year, aside from what Heinz does early in the spring, is what I think what you're saying.
To see if we can get on top of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And then maybe start to pull some roots or pull back the sides a little bit. It's probably an annual maintenance exercise. You're never gonna tackle it unless you do the next step.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good public awareness, improve fish passage, learn a little bit about it while we're at it. Let me know what works. If you want a weekend, weekday, I'll make sure I'm available. I'm going to Maine the 3rd weekend in August, and then the 3rd week in September, I'm going to Rochester, New York for a wedding. So,
Okay,
I'd say August is prime because it starts to go to
Yeah,
seed
right.
starting in September, so it's really up to, I mean, if you wanna, this is kind of gonna be your project. I
right.
mean, not yours, ours, but you're gonna lead it. If I can do it during the week, I will. So you give me a few dates that work for you. How about you do that? Give me a few dates that work for you, and
Yeah.
I'll see what I can get.
yep.
I will, I mean,
I'm on the Cape next Tuesday afternoon. I have a meeting at 11 o'clock, so next Tuesday afternoon would work.
That actually might work for me too.
Oh, okay. Next week is sort of clear for me. So I will look at Tuesday and,
I mean, if the three of us can give it a few hours, if I can get 1 or 2 more people, just
Yeah.
that I pull from volunteers, maybe we can
See.
get it quickly
Yeah,
done.
I've got extra loppers. We all need gloves because that stuff will slice you up.
Yeah, and there's a lot of poison ivy at the very beginning of it.
Yeah.
So 9, 10.
So you get to do that, mister, I don't get poison ivy.
Yeah, well,
There's always
I
a
think
first
Tuesday,
time.
actually,
Afternoon?
And they say as you get older, you start to get it.
Oh.
yeah, I'm a little intimidated by that poison ivy there, but Tuesday may do it. Just looking at my calendar, it
Okay.
looks, so maybe I'll propose that date
Yeah, afternoon.
and
Yep.
in the afternoon, Tuesday afternoon.
Well, I'll check my schedule, I'll get back to you tomorrow, but I believe that's open for me. And, so I can help out for a little bit, or Nikki, or both.
Let Heinz know, just in
And
case.
maybe I can grab another 1 or 2 people that I know.
Mhm.
Great,
Okay?
Okay,
Cool.
that'd be super. You got the permit, so.
yeah, we're almost there.
Proactive work, I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
Anything else on the new business?
Nope.
This is before 9 o'clock. I did not expect that a week ago.
Okay.
One of these days, I'm telling you.
Oh, it's gonna.
So let's enjoy it, let's go.
I do have the in-lieu fee program piece here.
Yep,
Um,
I sent it out too.
Yeah, so I think I'll look into that.
Yeah.
But the big thing is the heavy lifting on the permits.
Mm-hmm.
So let me know if I can help out the notice of intent. Otherwise, I'm gonna work with Heinz on the DMF permit,
Okay,
so. All right. Any more, you've got trail work coming up on or is it HCT
no,
on Tuesday?
HCT, because I had originally planned for Friday of this week,
Mhm.
and then Nikki got the day off, so I'm gonna try to, we're really short within community development here, so said I would try to be as available as I can to help. And then also, I forgot that Tyler at HCT had planned a scheduled workday for Monday,
Monday.
which
okay.
I can't do a Monday. So I said, let's wait until Monday's done and see how far they get, and then if we need to do another trail day, we will.
Okay,
But things are looking a lot better.
sounds like it, yeah, okay. All right,
We had about 10 people out last week, so it was really great.
how are we doing in this era of not having a trail committee? Is it working out through just?
We have, we actually met, last week or the week before, stewards, I call them the trail stewards,
Yeah.
they're not an official committee, but they're just people who care. And so, we've been a few months off. We
Mhm.
gotta get back into it, but still the same dedicated people. I don't
Yeah.
see a difference. The nice difference is they don't have to, they're not a formal group anymore. They don't have to take minutes. They don't have to,
Right.
we just make notes and get things done.
Yeah, get out in the field and do the fun part.
There's not the bureaucracy.
All right.
All right?
Any other new business? Well, I move we adjourn, I guess.
A second.
Second that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you
Let
all.
us know when we're off.